Rome Odunze is behind 2,000-yard receivers on the Chicago Bears. But don't let that fool you into thinking his role on this team is going to be small.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On the show today, we'll check in on Rome Odunze's development as the other first-round pick that hasn't gotten as much attention as Caleb Williams. First, we'll get an update on his injury status, where he was missing some practice time with some hamstring-type soft tissue issues. Find out kind of what led to that and how he's coming along now. Then we'll hear from Matt Eberflus about Odunze's role and how that fits in with, being behind a couple of great receivers and some of the benefits that come from that, and also how much they've been able to just put on Rome Odunze's plate, given his football IQ and general learning ability and just intuition as an NFL player. And then we'll wrap up with maybe a slightly different role for Odunze than you might expect on special teams. Might be able to carve out a role as the Bears' punt returner. We'll take a look at what that could look like and why that could be bad news for the likes of Velus Jones and others trying to make this 53-man roster. But with Odunze, part of the reason we haven't been able to hear as much about him and that he hasn't gotten as much hype and attention as Caleb Williams or even some of the other rookie wide receivers around the NFL is because he hasn't been fully participating in every practice. More lately he has been, but he missed even as early as rookie minicamp with some soft tissue injury, leg, hamstring type discomfort there that the Bears said from the get-go was out of an abundance of caution. No need to push him through it. No need to force him back out there. No need to rush him. If there's any kind of discomfort or something off at all injury-wise, they're not going to push it. It's the offseason. It's not as important practices with not in full pads, not against full team, right? Little easy stuff. So there was no reason to panic about some little nicks and bruises for Rome Odunze, even though we might have a little bit of PTSD about top 10 pick wide receivers starting things off the gate with injury. But we got to hear from Rome Odunze finally, really, I think for the first time since he was drafted, and he explained what was going on and how he kind of saw this come up and how he's feeling now.
We haven't talked to you since rookie camp, and I know that you had the hamstring issue for a couple weeks. How did that happen, and what was the recovery process like?
I think it was just the amount of reps that I was getting. I don't think I was prepared well enough to my body to accommodate those things, and it was a long off season and a lot going on with draft and the different phases, right? So and I didn't know exactly what to expect coming into the camp as well. So it's the first time experiencing this transition of things. So I think I just needed to get my hamstrings warmed up and get them ready to fire and ready to go. And luckily it was very minor because I felt like it did do a good bit to maintain my shape and maintain my form. But it was just rehabbing it. The training staff are great here, phenomenal. So them just monitoring it, building that strength back up, and I feel like I was back pretty quickly.
So if you had any concern about Odunze's injury situation, hopefully that alleviates it for you. Confirming, very minor stuff, just kind of a little bit of discomfort and tweaking in there. Nothing too bad, nothing too serious, nothing that he's not already fully recovered from. But his explanation for me raised another set of questions, just a little bit of that. I believe him, but I'm wondering a little bit how that happens. I don't want to say who's to blame here, but that sounds like the kind of thing that a team should be able to be proactive about and prevent and recognize on the front end so that you don't overdo it with a young player like this coming in rookie minicamp. Like, was it, I don't know, was it Rome's fault? Again, fault's not the right word. Was it Rome's responsibility to have had better conditioning for his legs at this stage? I mean, he mentioned he hasn't been working out and like been doing combine and draft prep stuff, not like practicing with a team. So it's, the hamstring or the legs or whatever aren't quite where they need to be. So is it on him that he should have been in a better condition for that? Or is it on the Bears as an organization, the coaching staff and the training staff for having him do too much too quickly and not recognizing that, hey, he's been doing draft prep for a few months and was just playing right before that and hasn't really had a time to fully like rest, recover, and also be in the right conditioning for practice. Like, I'm not really sure which side to be concerned about there, but I am concerned that like that all sounds like something that should be very preventable, right? Like if you truly feel like, yeah, I just kind of was overdoing it, then either you should have done less or they should have asked you to do less. Like somebody, I would think in the NFL with the sports science staff and the training staff and all the equipment and testing they can do and all this stuff, like I would have hoped someone would have been able to better recognize that either on either side of the equation, the Rome side or the team side. Like somebody would be like, hey, wait a minute, maybe I'm doing a little bit too much and pushing this too fast and too quickly. And the fact that they weren't like concerns me slightly, but I'm not concerned about Rome as someone being, like the injury side of it. Like I'm not concerned about this being the start of a trend or him being injury prone or anything like that. It's less about any kind of future concerns for him, but more just like, hey, wait a minute, did something slip through the cracks here that someone or multiple people should have been a little bit more on top of? Because it's not like other rookies were cropping up with injuries per se, so it's not like a across the board systemic thing of like working rookies too hard. I just think perhaps it's some combination of Rome being a top 10 pick, maybe Rome not quite being where he needed to be, and also the team wanting Rome to do a lot because he's such a primary player for them, and the wide receiver position maybe being one that will be asked to do more, running and things like that might put more stress on the hamstring than other positions, or even other wide receivers that weren't top 10 picks, and so they maybe aren't getting as many reps or aren't being asked to line up in multiple positions in the offense or run such a wide variety of routes. Like I would guess there's something fairly specific to the circumstances of who Rome Odunze is and what they were asking him to do as compared to everybody else that might lead us to a situation here. But the important takeaway is that he's good. Everything's fine. It's in the past. He's ready to go. Doesn't feel like there's going to be anything lingering there and not anything to be concerned about moving forward because now he's, really into the swing of things and geared up and ready to go for the rest of the offseason and then ramp back up into training camp and into the preseason and the regular season. And we'll get to see what Rome Odunze can do. Now, how big that role is has been a question because of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore ahead of him on the roster. But Matt Eberflus did a good job of breaking down like how they're not holding Rome back or going extra slow with him or anything, and that playing with those guys is only going to increase what he's able to do as opposed to really kind of take some things away. So we'll check in on how Rome Odunze might be used, including at some point, perhaps special teams, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I use the Gametime app on my phone all the time. It is my go-to ticket buying source because I love the experience. They've got all of the concerts in my area, the sporting events, including Chicago Bears games at Soldier Field, comedy shows, theater. Any kind of live entertainment, you can find it at Gametime. It's a great way for me to discover bands or other performances that are coming through my area and see what's going on around town. But they also have great last-minute deals where you can save a bunch of money by getting those tickets right up the day before or even day of deals there with some flash pricing and so much more. Plus, it's all-in pricing. So there aren't any fees added at the end of your checkout that make the tickets cost way more than you thought they would. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Rome Odunze is racing Keenan Allen and DJ Moore to 1,000 yards. And given that he's third in that pecking order, I don't think he'll be the first one to 1,000 yards. And I don't think he'll hit 1,000 yards this season. Those guys are obviously going to take the lion's share of the targets, and they're going to be the more premium focal points of this offense. But that doesn't mean there won't be targets available to Rome Odunze. That doesn't mean Rome Odunze won't be a strongly productive member of the Chicago Bears offense, and also find some other ways to contribute that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But because you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen ahead of him on the depth chart, then you don't have to ask him to be the number one receiver. But as a result, then, you don't also have to throw so much on his plate. You don't have to ask him to do everything at practice and run all the routes and be everywhere on all the plays. But for the Bears, they see him as fully capable of handling that, even as a rookie, because of the type of person and player he is, because of the talent that he has, but also, the football IQ, just the general studying ability, brain, learning style. Like, he's someone that they are trusting quickly and really not going to hold back throughout this process as they keep kind of putting a little bit more and more on his plate. And then having guys like Keenan Allen and DJ Moore to help him through that process only make it that much easier. So here's how head coach Matt Eberflus described their approach with Rome Odunze, and not really being concerned about, slowing down or anything. They can keep throwing everything at him and know that he's going to be ready to handle it.
With Rome, usually you draft a guy, a wide receiver especially, number 9 overall, that guy is expected to come in and be the focal point of the offense, or a focal point of the offense. It's a little different because of the guys you already have. How do you make sure you guys aren't going too slow with Rome, that you are able to get everything that he is able to do as a rookie?
Yeah, I don't think we're going too slow because we're giving him a lot. He's playing multiple positions, and I really think that he's going to be able to handle those concepts. And we all know the benefit of being with the two veterans. Seeing those guys, understanding how they operate during the course of a week. That's going to be really good. They're going to help him through training camp, because there's wisdom there with years and experience. But I really believe that he's going to have the ability to take off because of the other players. You're not going to be able to hone in on one guy. Say we just had him and he was the number one right now, so you'd be like, wow, so they could really do some things to him defensively, but you're not going to be able to do that versus our crew.
To that end, it seems like everyone you talk to about Roman, his past or present, talks about his feel for the game and his IQ. I'm just curious how you describe what you've experienced that with him since you got to know him here in the spring.
Yeah, I just, some guys just have a knack to do it, right? They can see the pictures, the drawings, in the classroom, and they can apply that right to the field. And he's able to process a bunch of information at the same time, and then take it to the field. And, he's really good that way. And he's, as you follow his career at Washington, University of Washington, and he's done a great job of making himself a great player. And he's going to continue to grow that way.
Putting everything on Rome Odunze's plate now, I think, is really going to accelerate his development, right? Like, having him, it's not taking the lumps, right? But it's kind of saying, all right, there's no need to slow things down and baby him through it and say, okay, we're just going to put you at the Z receiver spot, and we're only going to teach you those routes and those plays. And don't worry about what happens in the slot, or don't worry what happens at the X on the other side. Like, just be this receiver in our offense, and we'll get those other things later on. No, they're going to say, all right, let's learn it all. Pick it up. You got it. You can line up at any of the positions and do any of the things. You're talented enough. We're not going to put the kid gloves on here. And that's going to get him so much farther ahead than other younger players who might not be given so many responsibilities and have so much on their plate. I think it's a way of both preparing for the idea that, there's a chance Keenan Allen leaves after one season. There's talk of a contract extension negotiations being possible here, but you never know. So it's nice to have Rome prepared for, hey, if Keenan's gone, then you got to be able to fill a lot of his shoes and play on the outside in the slot where he's been playing. So having him work through that now can prepare him for that if you need him to the next year. But also putting so much on his plate allows him to take even better advantage of the resources he has at wide receiver with DJ Moore and and Keenan Allen. So that Rome can say, hey, Keenan, when I line up where you lined up and I run that route that you ran, like, how do I do that with my feet, or where am I supposed to go here, or what depth is that supposed to be, right? Like, he can go to those players and get advice and guidance at all of the things, not just the narrow subset of things that the Bears could ask him to do, but the full gamut of everything any of these wide receivers are going to be asked to do. And maybe as a result, he'll make a few more mistakes trying to do a lot of different things and juggle a lot of that stuff. But like, you let him make those mistakes now while you still have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen at receiver to really, be the main workhorses there and handle the production. If Rome messes up a play, it's fine. You got some other really good options to go for here. And then once he makes those mistakes and works through those now, then when you need him to be able to do more in the future, when you need him to take more targets or need him to play an even bigger role in the future, he's going to have those all under his belt and be that much more experienced and refined as a receiver by then. It's some of the same things we talked about last week, talking about the young players in the Bears defense in the secondary, right? Where Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker and Tyreek Stevenson all play as rookies and make some mistakes along the way, but the Bears were able to absorb that because of where they were as a team. And now just in their second and third years, like, those guys are already playing like seasoned veterans because they got that experience under their belt, doing everything and figuring it out as you go. And I think it's a similar type of approach and experience for Rome Odunze, except instead of being thrown into the starting lineup as your number one wide receiver or something and having to figure that out on the fly, they're asking him to do everything without having stakes on, or as high of a stake on, everything that he's being asked to do. He can just do it and do his best at it and not have to be also 1,000-yard receiver carrying everything in this offense. Like, I think he's going to finish pretty clearly third in terms of receiving yards this year. Like, you look back at the Seattle Seahawks last season with a rookie Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. Last year, DK Metcalf had 1,100 yards, Tyler Lockett had 900 yards, and Jackson Smith-Njigba had about 630 yards. And that might be where the Bears offense ends up with those three. Maybe Keenan Allen has 1,000, DJ Moore has, I think they could both get 1,000 pretty easily there, but maybe that leaves Odunze with 600, and that won't be a bad season. That won't be a disappointing season. It's just a reflection of, hey, there's only so many balls to throw around here, and you got two really, really good Pro Bowl receivers opposite them that are just going to get more targets first, plus Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett and DeAndre Swift. I mean, it's a loaded offense, and there's only so many passing yards you can distribute among them, but I think Rome Odunze is still going to get a very clear share, and heaven forbid there's any injury to either of the receivers ahead of him. He can step into their roles fully and be ready to thrive and play that much of a more important part of this Bears offense. If he isn't playing as much on offense, or isn't playing, it is truly that third fiddle behind those guys, that does free up more of his energy and time for special teams. And don't be surprised if we see Rome Odunze get involved on the punt return. We'll hear what that's like and how that could affect the rest of the special teams unit next on Locked On Bears. Don't forget, if you're looking for more sports coverage here on the Locked On Podcast Network, we are streaming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel and the free Amazon Fire TV's app. If you're tired of the argument television and screaming on Fox Sports and ESPN, tune on into Locked On Sports Today for the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news from the local experts right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, the YouTube channel is Locked On Sports Today, or it's a free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and that includes special teams sometimes. We don't talk about special teams a ton, but with Rome Odunze, there's a possibility he could be your number one punt returner this season. He's been working some of that at practice. The Bears have a few different guys with some real talent at that spot. But if you're thinking, okay, like Rome is big, fast, strong, and he's going to play the third most snaps at wide receiver and have the third most catches, third most targets, third most yards, most likely over the course of this season. So maybe there's more you can get out of him. We've seen him take handoffs on like end arounds and wide receiver reverses before at Washington, and he occasionally returned a couple of punts, but we didn't really see it very much in games in the regular season for Washington. But it sounds like, based on what he was saying, that he did it a bit more in practice and was ready to do it more. But again, like in that Washington offense, he's the number one guy, and they want him out there all the time. It's kind of like how last year, Khalil Herbert, or the last couple seasons, Herbert hasn't been your kickoff returner because he's been your number one running back. And it's just too much of a workload to put on a player to carry the ball that many times and be your kick returner and get even more touches in that area and practice in that area and maybe risk injury sometimes in that area. So you'd rather put someone else there and use this, the more premium player on the offense where he's a little bit more valuable. But if you've got Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, then maybe there is a spot for DJ Moore to potentially be your punt returner. I certainly think it would be fun and exciting, and he sounds fired up about doing it too.
Bro, we've seen you at punt returner. What do you like about that position, and do you see that as a way you can contribute this season?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I had my fair share of punt returns in college. I practiced it every day. I didn't get a ton of reps, in actual game. Would have loved to get more of those, but I think it's just another opportunity for me to shine and me to, add value to the team. I feel like I do it at a high level. So I'm continuing to grow with that, continuing to, find the technique of it. And, especially at this level with punters like Torrey, who, man, he's got some unique ones. So just learning those things. But yeah, I mean, you guys already know my favorite player is Devin Hester. So if I can contribute in any facet in the return game, I'm all for it.
If Rome Odunze ends up as your top punt returner, that could certainly spell trouble for Velus Jones trying to make this 53-man roster. I mean, at the wide receiver spot, he is at best your number 5 receiver with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and Tyler Scott. Pretty well your 1 through 4 there. And then it's between Dante Pettis and Velus Jones and, Freddie Swain, Colin Johnson, Nsimba Webster for that 5th and or 6th wide receiver spot, if they're even going to keep 6. And if Odunze becomes your top punt returner, then is there enough value to keep Velus Jones other than that he was a 3rd-round pick 2 years ago? I mean, he's done kickoff returns as well, so would you keep him to be just a kickoff returner if he's not going to be doing punts? I mean, it depends, right? It kind of depends on what other value you see him having in your offense, and we'll see how he handles training camp, but that's a real question there. I think at the very least, having Odunze practice punt returns now and through the offseason and training camp at least gives you an option where if, say, you say you roll with Velus Jones as planned, and then he gets hurt, or he has more muffs or fumbles, and you need to bench him or just cut him during the regular season, then you'll have someone like Rome that you can be excited about as the sort of the backup option there, who at least he's been practicing it, even if he wasn't doing it in games up to that point. And now you can say, okay, now it's your turn to give it a try back there. Because really, the Bears don't have a lot of, really solid, like, oh man, they got 4 great punt returners, and who's going to win that battle? Like it's Velus Jones, it's Rome Odunze. I think Tyler Scott's probably in that conversation. We saw Scott do some kickoff returns last season, but I don't think he did any punts. Trent Taylor was your punt returner last season. He's gone, so that's wide open there. Dante Pettis, a couple of years ago, was one of their backup punt return options when Velus Jones was struggling in 2022. So that's definitely an option in that mix, but it kind of feels like that's almost about it. And Scott, Velus Jones, Pettis, Rome Odunze. I mean, Khalil Herbert could get back to doing more kickoffs because he's not the number 1 running back anymore, but I don't know if he's as much of a punt return guy. Same thing with Travis Homer, who was a return man in Seattle, but hasn't done any of that with the Bears yet. So it certainly seems like there's a real path here for Odunze to potentially be that number 1 punt returner and make additional contributions there in addition to what he's able to do as the number 3 wide receiver in this Chicago Bears offense. And I think there's a real playmaking ability to him. And obviously, he mentioned the Devin Hester thing and wanting to do that could make him a dynamic threat there. I mean, we saw him return a huge one at Washington. I want to say, was it 63 yards there? So, like, he's got that ability, just it's been a pretty darn small sample size throughout that process. And so, he's obviously going to have to, work on that and continue to practice that and, actually beat out the likes of Velus Jones and Dante Pettis. But I do feel like if I had to choose who I wanted back there, like, I don't love the added tackling, the quote unquote injury risk, whatever that might be for him being your return guy. But like, if he's already going to be your number 3 receiver anyway, I think I'd rather have Rome back there than Velus. Like, ideally, Velus Jones has a great training camp, a great preseason, is your return man and is a great return man and gives you a better return on the investment of the third round pick in him. I think that's, if you're the Chicago Bears, that's the ideal scenario from a team building standpoint. But like if I had to pick today, whether Velus Jones or whether I'd rather have the ball in the hands of Rome Odunze or Velus Jones on a punt return, it's Rome Odunze, and I think that would be really fun to see, and I think it's an opportunity for him, like, because, you know, like a year or two from now, whenever the Bears move on from Keenan Allen, and then it's Rome and DJ Moore, like, he's going to be too valuable for your offense at some point to be using as a return man there. Like, it's just not, I don't think he's going to be a long-term kick return option for you, because you're just going to want to protect him to be a 1,000-yard receiver every season. But for his first year, to get him some touches and get him on the field and let him be more of a playmaker than he's going to get to be on offense at times, why not throw him out there on punt return? I'm glad they're having him practice it and work through it now to at least compete there. And even if he's not your regular season day one punt returner, he's always an option if you have to make a change at that position and not have to go find somebody on the street like we've seen the Bears have to do a couple of times in years prior. So we'll watch out for the kick return game once the Bears come back around for training camp. You can be sure any and all special teams updates we get, we'll bring them to you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We've been a little bit short of quite daily here in June. It's kind of the slow time of the year. I've been taking Friday podcast off so far. I think that's probably going to be the case tomorrow, barring any kind of breaking news. But we're still here for you most of the week, every week. We're not taking any kind of extended breaks or anything like that. We're going to be riding with you all the way up through training camp, getting you ready with position previews and preseason previews and so much more. Before you know it, the Bears will be back in pads, hitting each other once again. But in the meantime, I hope that the Locked On Bears podcast is there to help you bear down.